Hello guys, this is Goodlike, and we're back to some more Dark Souls 3 thoughts or what have you. Yay! I've been a bit away recently. In fact, I haven't played Dark Souls for a few weeks since the last time, but yeah, I've returned home from a trip to visit my family in another town. It's not big or anything. Point is, I have a day off tomorrow, so I'm gonna go ahead and try and record some Dark Souls 3. But before that, I wanted to record this video, and it may end up being a bit lengthy, so I will try to get it out of the way today. Probably won't be that long, actually. Who knows? Yeah, so Dark Souls 3 thoughts. I still kind of remember what happened last time. I think I was a bit disappointed, but maybe not as much as previously. So let's start with the fact actually that I had some chance to play Dark Souls 1 and watch some Dark Souls 2 footage. Just happened across someone playing it that I wanted to see. So I watched some, and I didn't play that much of Dark Souls 1. Mostly I just wanted to see if I was correct in my assumptions of the past. Like, am I wrong? Is this strange? Am I misremembering things? First things first, yes, there is some tracking, even in jump attacks, even in Dark Souls 1. Definitely. I believe the undead in Undead Burg will sometimes do that. However, you have to understand that these are the undead from Undead Burg, who will basically take a minute to turn around or something. Exaggeration, of course, but the point is, even if they do that, they do it extremely ineffectively. And I haven't checked if they track dodges. I don't think so. I know Capra Demon tracks dodges because he's the Capra motherfucking demon that nobody likes. But Undead, maybe little. I'd have to check, and it's really hard to do that because you have to wait for them to do a jump attack and then dodge at the right time, etc, etc. Regardless, the point is that even if they track, they're not like the PvP enemies in Dark Souls 3 and 2, by the way. They're pretty much the same thing, and the game suffers greatly for it. Another point of comparison, and I'm not sure if this is just because, you know, it's Dark Souls 1 port with mouse and keyboard, so it feels like the mechanics have a little bit of a delay to them in Dark Souls 1. Like, you press dodge, but then it kind of waits a bit and then does the animation. It's a very short delay, but it doesn't mean that you can't, like, just wait as much, whereas in Dark Souls 3 I feel like there's less of that. And I can't remember Dark Souls 2 because I don't want to remember Dark Souls 2. But yeah, it's noticeably longer, but it doesn't obstruct gameplay because everything is so slow in that game compared. I did the Dark Knight in Undead Burg, and I think I parried him 5 times in a row. Except I whiffed one and got a partial parry when he was doing a stab thing. It was a bit too hasty, I guess, or too slow. I don't know which one it is anymore. But the rest of his attacks were so incredibly easy to parry, it's not even funny. It's not even funny, man. It's like, really? It's that simple? Come on. Even the hollows were harder to parry, because they have, like, I don't know, long wind-up times that are sometimes confusing if you're not used to them, and I was no longer used to them because I hadn't played Dark Souls 1 for a long time. Anyway, point is, there's some potentially better things in Dark Souls 3, but overall I feel Dark Souls 1 is just so much better. Another thing that I noticed that was really important was that I could one-shot enemies that were shit. Like a shitty fucking undead in the first area of the game. All you gotta do is two-hand and use a strong attack with a weapon. Or use an appropriate weapon, like a Cyander, you know. But aside from using really strong weapons, you just two-hand strong attack. Easily one-shots pretty much everything. All the way up to the post-Taurus Demon area. Post-Taurus Demon, it seems I was just slightly off with my base weapon from one-shotting them, which sucks, but well, whatever. Still much better than Dark Souls 3, where you can parry an enemy, hit him with a strong attack or something, maybe two-handed left attack, and he's still gonna be like ready and waiting to kick your ass in the first area of the game, effectively. That's a bit much, don't you think? Like, sure, there's like these tiny hollows there as well that take 2 hits. They still take 2 hits, but they're weaker. But then, like, every enemy other than them takes more, takes too much. It takes too goddamn many hits to kill things in Dark Souls 3 is what I'm trying to say. It's ridiculous. Why does it take so many hits? Why so sponge? Why you gotta be so sponge, game? Come on. So to go back to the list of things that I wanted to compare. Oh yeah, like the Burial Knight. Another thing that I didn't mention, I believe, before is kind of interesting. Like the Burial Knight's, the way it's designed kind of reminds me of the Titanite demon under the Undead Parish bonfire. You basically have the same setup. You go down a little bit and you have a room where there's a strong enemy that arguably you shouldn't be fighting when you meet them. You can probably argue that for the Burial Knight, though I'm not sure, because technically the progress is the way of Burial Knight, so where else will you go? I don't think I found any other actual pathways that you could take and get anything out of. But here are a few differences between them. So first of all, when you meet the Titanite demon for the first time, you will immediately notice that he is guarding a passage. Not a locked door like the Burial Knight, but a passage that is open and clearly way too small for you to follow him, which kind of indicates, hey, you may want to run past him if you can't handle him right now. Whereas with the Burial Knight, while you technically can do that, that doesn't feel right. I mean, I think that Dark Souls 3 has animation immunity. I'm not 100% sure, and I've not really had a good opportunity to test it, but some footage that I saw made me think, yeah, you can probably run past him, click the door, and then you're good. But that shouldn't be the case. The way the level is designed clearly indicates you're supposed to kill him, then open the door. In fact, previously, when you faced the very first boss, something Gundyr, the dude that elbows you because you saved him from a fucking sword going through his chest, that asshole, you try to skip him by going through the door, it doesn't open. You have to kill him to open the door, even though the door doesn't even say, oh, it's locked. No. It's just a door that you can't interact with. So it kind of like gives you this idea that you're not supposed to go past things. If the door is closed on the other side, you're supposed to kill them and then move on. But, god damn it. The Burial Knight is definitely way too ridiculous for that part of a game. I mean, I killed him, but you can't say it was easy. Again, to recount, he has very many attacks, which I would assume also will quickly deplete your stamina because he's technically wielding like a strong weapon. I don't actually remember what weapon it is, but I think it's kind of like a sword, because he likes to slam it and then he'll slam it behind him, something like that. I can't imagine you just being, oh yeah, I have this wooden shield, I'll block all of his attacks with impunity, and then strike him once before he recovers and lands the rest. I don't think so. Like, not even close to that. So blocking's really out of the question at that stage of a game. Maybe if you could skip him at a later stage of a game, yeah, you could put on some great Shield of Artorias equivalent of Dark Souls 3, and then just face tank his attacks, and then strike him once, wait a bit, and repeat. And maybe that works. But this is... But again, not only has the game up to that point kind of not been about skipping. Sure, I've done a fair share of skipping, but every single thing just gets in the way of it. And again, it doesn't feel like you're supposed to skip because the level doesn't convey this idea that this is just an enemy that you can run past because of the door being closed shut, essentially, and there being no other passages and the columns being fucking useless. It just feels you gotta kill him right here, right now, and then proceed. And this really ties back in what I said before about this lack of depth. It's just the sense that this fight really can only be done in one way, assuming you don't cheese it. Because I believe you can cheese it by making him drop into the shaft of the elevator that you take down. But I feel like that doesn't really seem like the correct way. The main reason I will say this is because there's a huge distance between the enemy and the shaft, and he already has a hard time moving into the second room. You have to really provoke him to get him out of his room, let alone get him all the way to the shaft. And he has these special charging attacks that you will get hit by them, and possibly even by the follow-ups if you screw up. And they will fucking destroy you. I wouldn't be surprised if people would just constantly fail to even get him to the shaft. Really? Does that really count? The fact that you can kill an enemy through fall damage by exploiting their AI a little bit? If that was the intention, they could just place some more holes around. So, in fact, the enemy has a charging attack. So it's actually perfect for that strategy, you know? You position yourself in such a way that you are behind a hole, he will charge in and fall off. Perfect, right? But there's no holes. The only hole is far away, and God, good luck getting him to follow you there. So, what gives, right? It doesn't seem like this is legitimate and feels more like a cheese tactic. Almost like, you know, shooting the demon if you go the other way instead of down with arrows. But even there, at least, you know, you have an ally that distracts him, so it feels a bit more legitimate. And overall, that is why this fight pissed me off so much. Not only it's annoying to get to, not hard, annoying. Not only it itself is just ridiculously taxing fight that pretty much has to be dodged around. It just gives that feeling you have to do it in this particular way. The way that I did it at the end, which was basically just try to get behind him and hit him as much as possible while avoiding as many attacks as possible. You know, you'd think I'd be happy about such a thing, because one of my favorite fights in Dark Souls 1 is Ornstein and Smough. Especially enjoyed it with my daggers only rule in New Game Plus. So you would think, yeah, you know, why don't I like this fight? What's the point? What's the problem with it? And I think that that's kind of the idea that, you know, it's fine to have such ridiculous things in New Game Plus. But this is progress. You have to go through this enemy, and skipping it again doesn't seem like the right thing to do. You can mechanically know that you can skip him, presumably, because I'm not even 100% sure that you can, but let's assume that you can. But it doesn't make sense for a first player's perspective. And then the only way to truly fight it without cheese is kind of just wing it. And by wing it, I mean just dodge, hit, dodge, hit, and with breaks in between to recover your stamina as much as possible. Like I said, there's no real depth to that fight, from what I can see. There's nowhere you can really go to like gather some items or armor to kind of prepare yourself at this stage of the game. Maybe if this happened halfway through the game, I would have been less annoyed because I'd have a lot more levels under my belt. I could maybe respec, I don't know if that's an option in Dark Souls 3. And I could switch to like a super shield, which I might even have and be able to upgrade to like high level. And I'd be like, yeah, motherfucker. I'd probably still be pissed because we have the example of the Ruined Sentinels, I believe, from Dark Souls 2, that was not enough. Well, technically it was, but I would say it was like mandatory. But this stage of the game, it just feels bad, you know? I guess my point is that maybe that what I want from fights in Dark Souls is less, oh, I can time it so perfectly to avoid every single attack, and more, I figure out the pattern of your attacks, and I'm using everything I have to my advantage, like these pillars right over there. Those are like two different styles of combat. Something like a difference between just backstepping every attack of Gwyn and forcing him into attacks that you can trivially parry and then parry him, are two different ways to do it. And I prefer the second one, not the backstep one, because the backstep one is really just a shitload of practice. That's all it is. You just keep doing it until you manage it. Some people will manage in less tries, some people in more tries, but ultimately, you know, that's all it is. Whereas the second one, you can, even assuming the game is built that way, approach in-game and figure out as you play. Once again, you may take longer to figure out, or less to figure out, but there's kind of options in the game of what you can use, and you can try things. What is it that you can try against Boreal Knight? Nothing. There's nothing you can try. Pillars don't help, kiting doesn't help, nothing works against this guy. Maybe, I don't know, and he has like 10 times weakness to lightning, so you put on the gold pine resin on your weapon and one-shot him. That'd be pretty fucking hilarious and absolutely retorted, but maybe. That's a slim possibility there. I don't remember if I actually... I used the fire damage, which didn't seem to make that much of a difference. There's maybe something silly like that, but nothing from a gameplay standpoint. And to me, that seems like shit. Maybe because I've already played games that do that. Like, I've played Osu. That's a game about timing things as perfectly as possible. And it does it infinitely better than Dark Souls because it focuses on that as the gameplay mechanic, that is the main gameplay mechanic. It's a rhythm game. Of course it's gonna be better, assuming it's well done, and it is well done-ish. Having these kind of mechanics in Dark Souls 3 doesn't really do it for me. Just like, oh, yeah, whatever. Been there, done that. Who cares? But this could just be me, I don't know. I'm trying to understand what made me feel so disappointed about that fight, and I feel like this is the best explanation I can give it. It's just that I felt that I had to fight this enemy in this certain way, otherwise it's not gonna work. And I feel like that is fine for something like a challenge run. It's not fine for something that you clearly, based on all the design and everything, are supposed to just beat in order to progress. That would be my final judgment of this fight against the Boreal Knight. So now we can move on to things that actually happened in the game. in the last session. So we had some fight against PvP dudes, and PvP dudes are back, baby. They're straight taken out from Dark Souls 2, except they don't have the shitty red glow. Admittedly, they're more so annoying than bad. In the sense they're annoying because they're clearly cheating. Like, there are times when they will simply dodge an attack because I perform an attack, not because they expect it. You can see this when sometimes, you attack and they're like clearly far away from your attack, but they still dodge away from it perfectly, mind you. Because they just seem to be programmed. Oh, you input this attack, well, we just dodge sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time because sometimes you can catch them in the middle of their, AI doing something. Like, it's preparing to attack. And if you have a faster attack, you can catch them off guard. My biggest issue with these enemies is that despite cheating and everything, they also have an absurd amount of health. Like, the amount of hits you have to land into them is insane. And yes, you can technically heal if you can manage against them, which is not a guaranteed thing. But I'd rather you disabled healing, but then made it, the first guy to land 3 hits wins. Because then I'd land those 3 fucking hits very easily. But no, instead I have to land like 20 hits to enemies 2 or 3. And this reminded me of the final thing I forgot to talk about that's different from Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, and that's the attack queue. The attack queue, or just, input queue, maybe is the more correct way to say it, is retarded in Dark Souls 3. There's no other way to say it. I played Dark Souls 1, it doesn't even come close. I can spam my attack as long as I stop reasonably soon. I won't attack another time. Not even close. If I spam the way I spam in Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, I just fucking spend half a minute wasting my stamina. Exaggeration. But the point is true. The input queue in Dark Souls 3 is cripplingly bad. In fact, if someone reviews Dark Souls 3 and doesn't immediately jump to this and say, this is a cripplingly bad problem with the game, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Just, you can ignore him, because he's playing a different game. He's literally playing a different game if he doesn't notice this. I don't know what he's playing. I'll say this one thing though, in Dark Souls 1, the queue would actually be less problematic, because most of the enemies can be killed with just a one well-placed attack. Not always maybe, but in general, one attack, like I said, Undead Burg, the entire Undead Burg, starting weapon, two-handed strong attack, kills anything. It even has a nice arc if you're a pyromancer with the axe, you go like, whoosh, and you can cut down multiple enemies. Dark Souls fucking 3, if you're not gonna parry or backstab your enemy, you're probably gonna waste 2 full stamina bars attacking the motherfucker. And that doesn't even count the amount of stamina you waste trying to avoid his attacks. And that's just some basic enemy. We're not even gonna talk about fucking knights or what have you. God knows how much that would take. With their blocking and everything. Ooh, I shudder to think about it. So yeah, it's just completely unacceptably broken, and the game itself, it does not support just hit once gameplay. I mean, the enemies are just too spongy. You feel like you need to hit them multiple times, and then you hit them too many times, and then they hit you, and then you die, 'cause fuck you. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, the reason this reminded me, of course, is because it's even more amplified when you're fighting PvP style enemies who have ridiculous stamina. I wouldn't say infinite. I feel like they kind of have infinite stamina when they want to. It's more like, this is just a feeling, so I might be wrong. But it feels like they just have a certain amount of attacks that they can do regardless of the weapon of choice. Once they've exhausted those attacks, they will just be a bit more passive, resume. But it doesn't matter what the weapon is, a dagger or a fucking greatsword, Who gives a shit? Just fucking spamming those times and ignore any and all stamina. But that's maybe I just remembered wrong, so don't take that as gospel. It's a hypothesis. You could test it if you want to. Write down in the comments if you find out the truth out there. Because I probably won't be bothered to find out the truth myself. The point being, really, these enemies suck ass when you make mistakes. In PvP, and when fighting PvP enemies, because they're cheating, because of all that stuff, you just can't afford to make mistakes. Every mistake against an enemy like that is pretty much half your health full. Or more. And that sucks ass. You don't want to suck ass, do you? No, you don't, unless that's your fetish. Moving on. Point is, fuck that. Yeah, the one PvP enemy that I fought that took me many tries, I finally defeated by, like, reading their AI, basically. So I waited until they used a specific weapon to parry them, because that weapon has very specific, easy to parry attacks most of the time. For example, when they don't do jump attack, which you can probably parry just as well, I just don't have the confidence. And then I just would do everything in my power to avoid him while they use a dagger. Before that, I would just like use, as well, if I wouldn't parry, I would use like a strong attack with my sheeted katana or something like that, which would be faster than their slow weapon that they used. It's just fucking weird. I mean, I must admit that particular fight wasn't too bad, but again, it was just too spongy, and it was very trickery, because you will get attacked from behind, because that's what happened the first time. I went off to pick up some items and got attacked from behind. Thankfully I noticed this, but that wasn't enough, of course. So it's not again like this is an enemy you can just skip. It's again an enemy you have to fight. That is ridiculous. And PvP style. And you have Dark Souls 3 shitty mechanics. It's just very poorly thought out, really, I would say. Unless the intent was to be shit, then it's perfect. Overall, I'm not a fan of these PvP style encounters. At least they don't fucking respawn. That's a fucking relief. But make them optional, please. Like, just put them next to some items that I don't give a shit about and make them not attack me. That makes sense. Oh, this guy, he protects some PvP item like that. Well, not PvP, just an item. If you go down there to loot it, he will kill you. Otherwise, he will not kill you, because... Yeah, but no, I know that he will chase me from behind, so I have to kill him. Yay. Immediately after PvP dudes, we have dogs and archers. The ultimate shit combo. I don't think even Dark Souls 1 sunk that low. There's like one part where there's dogs and archers, but you have to fail to get into that part. You have to actually fall down onto the dogs and not have killed all the archers beforehand who don't respawn. I'm talking about Blighttown, of course. It's just such a shitty combo. On one hand, you have archers, which you want to avoid by hiding. On the other hand, you have dogs that constantly assault you, so you want to take them out quick and not hide at all. So what's the end result? The end result is you charge in haphazardly, kill as many dogs, and hope you have enough life to kill the remaining archers. And that's how I won. By throwing reason away and rushing forward, and the whole game feels structured like that, isn't it? Like, either skip the enemies or fuck it, just go whatever. In fact, the most progress I've done in this game was when I didn't fight, but just ran past everything and then fought afterwards when I had no choice. Maximum progress. Does that sound good to you? It doesn't sound good to me. I don't think that's good. You could consider that a valid strategy, of course. But this isn't even a matter of a valid or invalid strategy. Just, like, why would you even do anything else? Just rush in and do that. The whole next level beyond that part is just rush through a horde of enemies. And don't fight any of them. Because most of the paths leads to dead ends anyway. So you just kind of find the best route to dodge, and you make your way to the end. That's about it. Before we go into the spamminess of the level, there was one enemy before we start, and it's kind of a 50-50 thing. On one hand, it's an enemy that's easily dispatched. It's not hard to kill, and it teaches you about the mechanic in the upcoming area, sort of, but not really. A bit, in the sense that you learn that they set themselves afire, and that's probably a bad thing. You don't know what it does because you probably kill the enemy beforehand, because they look like the enemies you've met before, and every time you met the enemy that looked like that before, what they would do is yell, and if you didn't interrupt them, force just random enemies to appear from the surroundings and start assaulting you. Right, there's like a bunch of hollows right after that enemy that conceivably could have been there for that purpose. You wouldn't see them, but if this was an enemy that yells and brings other allies to help, those three could come and help him and kick your ass. This is reinforced because, you know, the pathway to this level had bird enemies, which did the same thing. Yell. If their yell succeeds and is not interrupted, they summon a bunch of friends and you get fucked by those friends because there's like a dozen of them and they're annoying as fuck to hit. And they're all aggressive, of course. Wouldn't want to have some fair fights. No, fuck that. So yeah, I feel like it doesn't really seem right. On one hand, if you do learn what this enemy does, and that is set himself on fire and basically insta-kill you if he touches you, that means you've been ignoring the advice from previous levels, so you probably have learned nothing, really. If you haven't learned before, why would that change with this enemy? And more so, you will probably die, because you will get insta-killed by the fire. Maybe you'll block it and you'll survive, but probably not. And you'll have to go back here again, because that's so fun to do through all the annoying fucking dog and archer enemies that already pissed you off at this point. And then, on top of that, if you do manage to kill it because you remember, oh, this enemy should be taken out quick, you'll be like, what the fuck, he set himself on fire? Is he gonna blow up or something? I don't even know. So you don't actually learn jack shit, so what's the point of that enemy being there? It's just poorly placed. A better way to do it would be to put the bonfire, to put him between, to put him on the way from the bonfire to the shortcut, essentially. So he's more like maybe patrolling next to the gates. Like he stands right next to the gates, it doesn't aggro until you come in there, and then he aggroes immediately as you step forward. But then he would immediately start his fire routine, so you would see it's different. You would rush towards him, but you would see it's different, and maybe try to avoid him. And now it's just like, oh, well, you run up to him and stab him, and maybe notice that he set himself on fire. And it's shit. It's not very well thought out. But of course this is very minor. I would say this is like the minorest of complaints that I have. It's just, it doesn't feel like it accomplishes what it should accomplish. If I understand why it is placed there, and that is to teach that there is such an enemy upcoming. And then there's the next level. I mean, the initial part is clearly just run past, because the enemies always respawn and they give you some shitty debuff that I couldn't find a way to get rid of. So that sucks. So you want to run past them, dodge all of them, but then it doesn't end there, because then you have the next part where you have to continue. Maybe I like missed the bonfire somewhere in there, but I don't think so. Even if I did, the bonfire would just cut out the run to the, whatchamacallit, through the graveyard. The soul would remove. There's no way I missed the bonfire beyond the graveyard part, because I looked every nook and cranny. That was the part that I took slow at least once before I gave up on going slow, because the amount of enemies is something that Dark Souls 2 would be embarrassed of. Dark Souls 2 doesn't have that many enemies between you and the next fucking checkpoint as that entire fucking area. That entire fucking area is like an entire fucking spoke of fucking Dark Souls 2 worth of enemies. Between ambushes, archers, fucking burning yourself enemies, annoying mage enemies, and more ambushes, and so on and so forth. It's just fucking insane, man. And even so, I found a way that's acceptable. It's pretty insane. You basically skip every enemy, you jump to the passage behind one of the enemies, then you run away to de-aggro all of them, and then you jump on top of the ambushing enemies, which somehow don't notice you because they're probably not programmed to. I mean, the game clearly expects you to go there because it has some ambushes up there on the roof as well, but then you drop off on the other ambushes and then you're like, yay. Of course, those aren't all the ambushes. If you actually go back a bit, you'll get ambushed again out of nowhere. Just fuck that area. But even if you do that, you're still faced with a multitude of enemies that are way too strong to fight on their own. Like, the amount of kiting I had to do, fucking ridiculous. It would be resolved if these fucking enemies wouldn't patrol that much and would be more stationary. But since everything patrols in this motherfucking game, you kinda have to pull enemies halfway back, because otherwise another one will just walk right into your battle. And your battle will be long enough, because once again, these enemies aren't pushovers. They're not like something you can one hit with a strong two-hand attack. You have to fucking ram it in them at least 5 times, and they're not gonna just stand and take it. I mean, seriously, these enemies, you can fucking spam attack them, which sort of staggers them, but then after a couple of these attacks, they'll suddenly recover all their poise. It's like, oh, I just pretended that I didn't have that much poise. In fact, I did have that much poise, and I will now strike you. The fuck, man? What happened to consistency? This is like, oh, the game literally telling you you're not supposed to attack these enemies more than once or twice. If you're attacking more than once or twice, you're doing it wrong, even if you have the stamina. Even though every enemy pretty much requires more than 2 attacks to kill them, you're doing it wrong, man. You're just not supposed to play that way, unless you have like a super buffed two-handed weapon that just insta-kills everything. No, unless you have that. But you probably don't, because it's the fucking start of a fucking game pretty much, so why would you have those things? There's always a way to play Dark Souls 3. I don't think it's a very bad game. It certainly... It's quirky. It sort of kind of has really bad spots. At its worst, it's worse than Dark Souls 2. That much I can tell you without a doubt. But at the same time, it seems to have parts of it that are better than Dark Souls 2. And what I mean by good or bad is really how they make me feel and how interested I am in trying to beat the game, essentially, because it presents me with interesting challenges. So I'm not sure. I'll play some Dark Souls 3 tomorrow, and it will hopefully become more clear what is the case. But I'm almost 100% certain that Dark Souls 1 is still way better than this game, like, for me. Like, I enjoy it way more. Like I said, I'd randomly installed it, set it up with mods, and still played it for a bit and didn't even notice like an hour passed by. It's so good. It's just set up in such a way that you can just enjoy beating it, for lack of better explanation. I don't know how else I can put this into words. It's, I mean, I kind of did already. Like, this whole video kind of gave a lot of praise, I would suppose, to certain aspects of Dark Souls 1. So I'm not gonna go ahead and repeat myself again for that. But yeah, at the same time, I don't think I'm gonna be as disappointed as I was with Dark Souls 2 at the end. I hope. I really hope. And yeah, unlike... I mean, technically I had exactly the same hope with Dark Souls 2 as well, though maybe a bit less so, because it never really gave me any bones. You know, it just kind of sucked and sucked. But at least Dark Souls 3 throws me a bone every now and then. It's not a complete disaster in that sense, so we'll see. Anyway, it's fucking been almost an hour. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.